You're fine.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 103 of the ITSM crowd. And I'm really looking forward to this one just because it's two lovely people who know an awful lot. So I know I'm going to learn something. We're continuing our evolution of service management theme. And one of the things that we're going to focus on today is just the history of service management. Where's it come from? How's it changed? And Lisa and Donna have got so much experience in this field that there's sure to be some good reflections, I think, coming, as well as looking to the future as well, and their involvement in things like the DevOps community too. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask our guests to introduce themselves. So Donna, if I can come to you first, if you can just tell us a bit about yourself.
So hi everybody, I'm Donna Knapp. I am the Curriculum Development Manager for ITSM Academy, and usually it's the team at the Academy that informs me about this, but I happened to notice the other day that I just celebrated my 16-year anniversary. So I've been part of the ITSM Academy family for a long time, and it's it continues to be a pleasure to work with Lisa Schwartz here. I am the Curriculum Development Manager, which means I'm responsible for maintaining and developing our course materials, which is awesome. And I always say I love my job because I get to learn a lot. I'm constantly being challenged to, develop courses about what is the latest methodology or framework. And so I get to learn a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Lisa, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I get to learn a lot from Donna, so that's one of my favorite parts of my job. So we co-founded the Academy a little over 18 years ago, which is just shocking to me. And so, I play a very active role in the Academy, and I get to spend a lot of time with Donna. We're always looking at, as we joke from the very beginning, we didn't call it ITIL Academy. There's a lot more to service management than just ITIL. And Donna and I both have a passion for figuring out, not just because ITIL says it, but to help our organizations really make improvements inside of their service management programs. We're both very passionate about that. And we both are process geeks too, which is one of our similarities.
me three.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to those of you that are watching us live, I can see we've got some people joined. If you want to ask Lisa and Donna anything or share your comments, your own experiences, please do use the YouTube chat functionality to do that. We'll see them and we can bring them up on screen. If you've got questions for our live, we do love to hear from you. But I think that's a good place to start, is this history that you've both got in service management. And Lisa, you mentioned ITIL there, which to quite a lot of people is synonymous with service management. But talk to me a little bit about where IT service management started and how and why you got involved.
Well, for me personally, my college degree is actually in advertising with a minor in journalism, and I was gonna go work at an ad agency, Mad Women. And what happened was my favorite professor in college, won't be as long as it sounds like it will be, said, go work for a print company first, because you can design the best thing in the world, but functionally, if you can't make it print and be successful, then... So I went to a printing company and they were buying their very first Mac, because I am that old. And so I built up their IT department. I was supposed to be in advertising, and like almost everyone I know in service management, I so fell into it. And from there, I ended up working for the largest compact reseller in the United States. And when they merged with HP and HP OpenView and their move towards service management, my boss's boss, when they were in the meeting about, we think you guys can do this, they were talking about SLAs, and boss's boss said, that's the Lisa's always talking about, we'll put her in charge of this service management practice. So I wasn't even in the room when it happened. That's how I got there. Donna?
So very early in my career, I was a computer operator. So I was doing service management. I just didn't know there was a name for it. And in fact, one of my jobs was to produce the availability reports. And it literally involved spreadsheets and a calculator, right? That's how we did things back then. But I was certainly doing things like managing incidents and doing problem analysis. But my career began I went to work for a manufacturing company, and I was the IT liaison to the company's ISO 9000 initiative. It's where I learned about processes. It's where I learned lean. It's learned, where I came to understand value streams. It's where I was introduced to Deming. So that was really kind of the genesis for what became my career in service management. While working at that company, we were introducing PCs, much like Lisa's experience. We were, deploying PCs within our company. Up until then, we had a mainframe. And so for everybody who's watching out there, I want you to, if you're old enough to recognize these, I brought show and tell. So my history of service management lies here. So for anyone who's out there,
wow,
I came up in the IBM days, right? So I learned about service management through the IBM yellow books. They also had the green books and the red books and the blue books. I moved a few years ago and I let go of a lot of books, and I couldn't let go of those because they're just like foundational to my career. So that's really where I learned about service management. And for everybody who doesn't know, the IBM kind of yellow books were an input to the ITIL framework. So at around this same time, ITIL version 1 was being developed. And then I came to IT service management in the form of ITIL in ITIL version 2. In fact, through ITSM Academy, I became a contract trainer for ITSM Academy early on. And kind of my first journey in that was attending an ITIL 2 foundation class taught by Jane Grohl. So here and we can fast forward from there.
Fantastic. And I love it. The whole falling into service management seems to be such a common theme. It's one of the things that I think maybe where we're missing is this determined career path, but that's a conversation for another day. So
that's a great conversation for another day.
Isn't it?
Yeah, we talked a lot about higher ed and ways to make this happen. And so many times over the 18 years, there have been higher ed organizations and particularly people in those organizations that have really tried. Some places have made very good progress, but over the years, it just kind of erodes. And I feel like we're very in an erosion state in terms of that right now. But also very interesting, as y'all know, I've been very involved in employee experience and XLAs, and there is a strong higher ed SIG coming up in terms of XLA. So maybe we could do something there, but not topic for today. Sorry.
No, but if you scroll through our back catalogue, you will find a couple of really good episodes on XLAs if that's an area that you want to dig into, and absolutely agree. So, I mean, my start was ITIL version 2, so I don't go back as far as the ITIL version 1 folks, but we're up to ITIL 4. There's an awful lot of other things that we're supposed to understand now. What do you think drives this kind of constant change in service management thinking?
I'm gonna let Donna take that one first.
So I think first and foremost, we have to, so I'm going to answer this 2 ways. First of all, there's this greater concept of service management, right? And so, part of its evolution comes from understanding what is value, how we need to co-create rather than deliver value, how we need to think about things like experience, right? There's that whole angle of it. And then there's the IT service management part of it, right? The ITSM part of it. And certainly what has changed the game there is digital and cloud. The technology has changed significantly. And it has kind of the removal of the physical barriers that used to stand in the way of progress, having to deploy servers, having to install PCs, has really required that we rethink our processes and we rethink our ways of working. And so if you look at the past 10 years, it's, how DevOps came along, how value stream management came along, how site reliability engineering came along. And I'm excited that ITIL 4 has embraced all of that, right? And now very, very much reflects modern service management.
And, conversely, a lot of the conversations that we have is there are still, Donna and I remind each other of this all the time. There are still organizations, sizable organizations, who are starting, maybe it's a complete retool, but starting incident management. Organizations are we do some like workshop kind of advising stuff, and a lot of that is around the simple stuff. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but onboarding, because the onboarding process that worked 12 years ago doesn't work 7 years ago, and the one that worked great the day before the pandemic is, so as the needs of the organizations change, service management has to change with it. And as Donna said, we're a lot more than just ITIL, but we are both very happy with ITIL 4 because it is such a modern take. I feel like it was actually forward thinking when it was released, and we'd lived with that ITIL 3 for so long that it was stagnant. And I think from a organizational perspective, I could see how the life cycle makes sense. We love to talk about feedback loops and life cycles, but the reality of it siloed everything off. It for a lot of organizations, the reality of ITIL V3 was exactly what no one wanted to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point about the simple things, because there are these, amazing organizations that are digital first, that are spawning all these new ideas, SRE coming out of Google, Microsoft's got its big modern service management practice. But then there are still an awful lot of organizations struggling to do the sort of the incident problem change. But it kind of feels like process isn't cool anymore. From an ITIL perspective, it's less mentioned in the foundation course, and now a lot of the content is kind of behind the Axelos website. Is that a good move, do you think? Do we still need to keep our processes?
Well, I'm gonna let Donna answer that. I'm just gonna giggle.
You realize always my challenge is like I'm incapable of controlling my face. So you're always gonna know by looking at my face how I feel about things. So I want to talk generically about the term process, right? Because here's the reality. We're talking today a lot about value streams. Well, what's a value stream? I mean, in the simplest sense of the word, it is in fact a process. If you go back and read, the early writings about lean, they consistently refer to value streams as processes. Deming refers to value streams as processes, right? So it is in fact a process. It's an integrated set of activities that takes inputs and produces outputs. So, we're wanting to move away from that concept, because with ITIL, we went a little bit of astray in that the work became about the process, about handling incidents, versus being about why do we handle incidents, so that we can enable our customers to realize better value. Like somewhere along the line, we forgot about the importance of value realization. Having said all that, I want to say this. I just read an article that increasingly CEOs in organizations are coming up, were COOs, right? They're being promoted from COO to CEO. So we have in CEOs today individuals who very much understand processes, right? And they understand the importance of processes, and they understand the importance of continually improving and ensuring the efficiency of processes. They also very much understand that you should never use the word automation without using the word process in front of it. What do we automate? We automate processes. You can't automate work until you make that work repeatable. So I agree with you, Claire, in that I think the word process has gotten a stigma somewhere along the way, but the reality is we need to understand them. And I was going to launch into my little rant about the future of IT service management, but I'll save that because I think
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned digital earlier on, Donna, and I guess that's one of the changes that that the technology isn't just sat in the IT department now; it's embedded in every area of the organisation. And I think back to early IT jobs that I had, where if the IT stopped working, nobody really cared because they just went back to how they used to do things before.
Right.
But I mean, that surely has had an impact on how we think about service management as well.
For sure. And I think that I think what we need to understand today is that, and here's where I've had a little bit of a shift in thinking, even kind of over the years. Mike Cardinal, who works for Third Era, and I just did a presentation about this. Mike is famous for saying no tools before the rules, right? In other words, do your process work and then look at your tools.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike and I have both, over the last 10 years, kind of rethought how we view that. And we now understand that you have to let technology inform your process design, right? Otherwise, you're going to design a process that's going to require you to heavily customize a tool. And we never want to do that today, right? So if we understand the capabilities that tools provide us, and we design processes that leverage those capabilities, we're going to be a lot better off today. And I do think, kind of going back to where ITIL version 3, where we went astray with ITIL version 3 a little bit, is that we made it all about the processes. And if you actually look at ITIL version 3, it intentionally does not talk at all about technology.
Mm-hmm.
But what was happening the whole 10 years that ITIL version 3 was out? All these advancements were occurring in technology. And so how we manage that technology had to be changing as well, but we were stuck, right? We were stuck, in the past. And that's unfortunately what processes can do, is they put you in a place in time, right? They represent a point in time in which you thought this was the right way of doing things. And if you're not continually improving those processes, you're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I used to have a perm. The way things used to be cannot be the way things still are. I think also with digital, in my role, I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of C-suite people. And when I'm talking, and I really love having those conversations about what's really going on at, insert big company name here. And to me, it's fascinating that because digital transformation is defined differently by every single person that I speak
Mm-hmm.
with. And so taking something that is so important and also so nebulous. I mean, you guys have seen the stats about organizations that, have had not successful digital transformations. When you take something that's so nebulous and you try to retrofit it with like a foundation of process, V3 really it was square peg round hole. It really was. And a lot of the best practices that are illuminated in V4, I think are helping us collectively get to a place where now when I talk to someone about their digital transformation, while I'm not still hearing necessarily the same words, I'm hearing a lot of the same challenges that have been identified and solutions that are being deployed. And I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Donna, you mentioned the technology now is setting the standard, I guess, for a lot of the fundamental elements of service management. Because back in the day when I started out consulting, you could say as an ITIL consultant, which isn't really a thing anymore, but you could say, oh yes, we're technology agnostic. We care about the process. We don't mind what tool you use to make that work. And now things are very, very different. And both of you are hugely experienced in the education field. What are the key skills now that you think ITSM practitioners need to have? What should they be studying? What should they be, learning about? Who should they be speaking to? What's in the toolkit for an IT service management professional?
That's a great question. Donna, you do yours first.
So the DevOps Institute produces something called the Skill Up report, right? And they kind of talk about the skills that people need. And of course, because we're process geeks, it should be very exciting to us that at the top of the list is process and framework skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
So understanding how to design and improve processes, understanding the integration of frameworks, understanding that we should never be using the word or. It's not ITIL or DevOps or value stream management. Really, these are all a progression. And today, the highest performing organizations are using C, all of the above. We certainly also have to be aware of things like artificial intelligence and process automation and how technology enables those types of things. Because I think what those are enabling us to do is to understand that at the end of the day, why we put in place processes are to collect information and to then be able to analyze that information and make better decisions and do better work. It's about the data. So if we can kind of get clear on that, I don't care what tool you're using, from a service management perspective, you're collecting some data. Mm-hmm. And then the idea is that you do something with that data. So I think the skills that we need, I think the technical stuff has kind of taken care of itself. I think the skills we need are, the statistical analysis skills, the data analysis skills, the decision-making skills, the cognitive thinking skills. And we kind of started off early on, starting to go down this path. I really am worried about young people today. I'm worried that young people aren't learning problem solving. They're not learning, effective decision-making, cognitive thinking. They're not developing those skills. And in my opinion, those are the skills that are really critical, as we move into the future.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have let her go first on that because I knew we were going to say the same thing. Dang it. But I think it's very interesting that value stream mapping now, and we're working with several organizations that have gone through our certified process design engineer course, mm-hmm. And this is not a plug. I will just say we hashtag that one Lisa's favorite course, and Donna said done it. Right? It's a internet coffee drinking game. So we call it. So working with organizations who are focusing on their process design and fundamentally looking at it in terms of the value stream, because going back to what we're all saying is, when we all started, a fool with a tool was the expression, right?
Yep.
And
yep.
now, as we've said, the reality of it is those tools have come a long way. They're integrated. They're hooked into each other. ServiceNow with everything as a service being their dream. So the reality is that a fool without understanding their tool might be the new expression, right? So then the fundamentals of that, which is strong, solid, agile processes and getting there through value stream mapping. It's been really exciting what our enterprise clients have done in the last 2 years in particular, with those skill sets. And the other thing is, we love to see, we beg practitioners to present. And so we, at the Academy, we do a monthly webinar, and people always say at the end of the webinar, we say, what else would you like to hear? We want to hear from practitioners. So we mm-hmm. reach out to practitioners all the time that we think are doing cool things, but there's this, I don't know, I'd like for them to just know that when we say, Donna or I'll help you build it, and then we'll help you submit a conference for, I just think it's very important right now, and this probably has a lot to do with COVID and blah. I feel like the mid-career practitioners, if we say we're sort of a little sliding past mid-career, right? But the mid-career practitioners, where are their stories? What are they doing? Mm-hmm. What are they working on? We're very, we really try to motivate our alumni to get mm-hmm. out there and tell their own story. Because you know what? The three of us can sit around and talk about it, and it's interesting. But hearing what somebody in the trenches today and this digital transformation and what went wrong and why, and I think, it'd be great to see more of that.
Absolutely. And I think, Donna, I've not left you enough time for this, I suspect, but the last little question we discussed is, what's the future of IT service management?
So I kind of want to answer that two ways. First of all, I'm very passionate, both professionally and personally, I'm very passionate about the concept of sustainability. So we're launching IDLE for Sustainability later this year. I really feel like the fate of the world is at stake here. And so we have to really start thinking about sustainability. And the cool thing to me is that CEOs, this is a top priority. I did a state of presentation earlier this year, and 40+% of CEOs had sustainability as one of their top priorities. Companies are starting to understand that this can, in fact, provide them a competitive advantage. They have to learn to stop thinking about just constantly, focusing on increasing the, price of their stock and thinking about long term. How do they stay in business for the long term? So I think that's part of the future, is really understanding the role that IT is going to play going into the future in enabling the long-term sustainability of organizations, and how, in order to do that, our processes are going to have to, and our practices and our value streams, like, let's use all the idle words, are going to have to continuously evolve. So kind of that's one part of it. I think the other part of it is certainly understanding the nature of automation and understanding that there are big parts of IT service management that are going to be automated in the future. But there still have to be people that understand that automation and who understand, again, what that process looked like at the time we automated it, and be able to take the data and use it to realize, okay, that process that we've automated is no longer efficient, and it's time to go back and revisit it. Lisa kind of said this earlier, like, it used to be that if, our tools broke down, we still had the paper forms. We don't have those paper forms anymore. So what does that look like in the future? In the future, does anybody really know what process is behind all of this automation? Somebody really needs to understand that stuff and be able to deconstruct it when needed, and then continually improve it from there. And when we look at automation, so what is one of the big strong trends is value stream management. And I'm talking about it now from the platform approach. A big hope that I have in terms of where value stream management is going to take us is that we'll finally crack the nut in terms of being able to truly report on value realization. Because up until now, we've had all these proxy metrics. We can talk about incident resolution and average response time. And even when we talk about value, sometimes we talk about, do we make the company more profitable, or do we, improve the productivity of our employees? And those are still internally centric metrics. So can we crack the nut in terms of whether or not our products or services are actually helping the people who are using them to achieve what they want to achieve?
That's awesome. Thank you.
And my hope is we're going to crack that nut, right? To me, that's the future, is we'll get there. We'll not talk about it anymore. We will get there. And then the question is going to be, what's beyond that? I don't know. Lisa and I might be retired by then, but I'm crazy.
So just to wrap up then very quickly, because we're pretty much out of time. Any tips or resources that either of you want to share? Any books, any blogs, anywhere you want to point people as a follow-up to this conversation?
Well, Donna's book that she just held up, you can't see this because behind my screen, I have 5 books. And one of the 5 books that I have and I use all the time is her process design guide. And truly every project that we're going to start here at the Academy, big project, I go back there just because the fundamentals are so important. We have the ITSM professor blog, which has been, for about 16 years, we've been serving out. The instructors all play the role as the professor. So a lot of that stuff is questions that are asked in the different classrooms, kind of ripped from the classroom. So the professor has, I feel like, really a lot of good content and things. If you're thinking, what's this SRE that I'm hearing about? Go out to the professor. It's a good place. It's consumable content. It's easy to consume, I think.
Thank you.
And the process design guide, by the way, is under revision. So there will be a second edition out next year.
Don't tell people not to get it now.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I think the other thing I would say is be aware of other ways of working, right? Be aware of DevOps, be aware of, what the Value Stream Management Consortium is doing, and sign up there's a ton of state of reports that are being produced by a lot of those organizations. Kind of leverage those and attend those webinars, and then start to, follow the thought leaders in those communities. I learned something new all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, I learned a new term. I went to a webinar by the Value Stream Management Consortium, and I learned a new term. So, which phenomenally excites me. So, challenge yourself. And in that respect, I will say, if you read no Idle 4 books, read Idle for High Velocity IT. Because what High Velocity IT does is speak to the state of service management as it is today. And it is where we see alignment with DevOps and Lean and site reliability engineering. So if you're kind of not familiar with what's happening in all of those areas, it's going to give you a ton of things to look up and learn more about.
I'm also a fan of the ITSM crowd. Don't know if you've heard of it.
Thank you very much. And funnily enough, our next episode, so our next episode is the 3rd of August at 4 p.m. BST, and that's talking about the next generation. So Joshua, who's a really brilliant young man, teaches coding in school, tries to get kids involved in coding. We're going to learn all about that, but also ask how come he's never heard of service management, and that's going to be a brilliant conversation. So I think we'll pick up some of our themes from today. Lisa, Donna, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to see you, and that's been a brilliant conversation.
That was a fast half hour.
Isn't it? It just zooms by. But huge thank you to you both. Thank you to everybody who's been with us live, and we will see you on the next episode of the ITSM Crowd. Bye.
See ya.